The airport was chaotic that Monday morning. People scurried back and forth with suitcases, cell phones, and coffees in hand, trying not to miss their flights. The sound of luggage wheels echoed through the lobby as the metallic voice from the loudspeaker announced another international departure. Passengers bound for Paris, please proceed to gate 12 for immediate boarding. Among the hurried crowd, a black woman walked with calm steps, almost in contrast to the frenetic pace around her. She wore simple clothes, a white cotton blouse, pressed black dress pants, and a silk scarf tied around her braided hair with discreet elegance. Over her shoulder was a leather bag, a bit worn but carried securely. As she passed through the gate, the attendant glanced at her, and for a moment a trace of doubt crossed his face, but he quickly returned to professionalism and checked her ticket. "Have a safe trip, Mrs. Johnson," he said with a slight smile. She thanked him with a gentle nod and entered the jetway, where the sound of voices was drowned out by the hum of the air conditioning. Inside the plane, the bustle was intense. Passengers adjusted luggage in the overhead bins. Children cried, and flight attendants gave seating instructions. The woman entered with a serene demeanor, but immediately felt the eyes on her. A middle woman with a gleaming pearl necklace elbowed her husband and whispered, "Honey, I wonder if she's on the right flight. Look at the way she looks." Her husband, in an impeccable suit and neatly combed grey hair, glanced over and murmured, "Don't worry. She's definitely in economy class. She must have gotten lost." But to their surprise, the woman didn't stop at the curtain separating economy from first class. She walked steadily on, her shoes making a discreet sound on the soft carpet. In first class, the atmosphere was different. Comfortable silence, soft lighting, wide seats that looked more like beds. There, the stares were even more intense. A man in his 40s, wearing a gold watch and a tailored suit, frowned and snorted. "There's definitely been a mistake. First class isn't for everyone," he muttered softly, but loud enough for the woman to hear. Without reacting, she stopped in front of seat 1A, where a flight attendant was waiting with a smile. "You're very welcome, Mrs. Johnson. This is your seat." "Thank you," she replied softly and confidently. As she settled her bag on her lap and gazed out the window, an uncomfortable silence hung in the air. Several passengers exchanged glances filled with judgment and curiosity. The silence that hung over first class seemed heavier than the sound of the engines already warming up. The gazes on the black woman were like invisible needles, piercing her serenity. Some passengers even pretended to look away, but soon returned their curious and suspicious eyes to her. The lady with the pearl necklace, seated a few rows back, leaned toward her husband in a lower but still audible tone. "First class? How can a woman like that get that? I bet it's some kind of raffle or charity." The man, visibly embarrassed by the comment, simply shook his head, trying to hide it. Across the aisle, a robust, arrogant-looking man named Charles watched with a cynical smile. His Italian suit and the watch that gleamed in the plane's soft light bespoke ancient wealth, and his gaze betrayed deep-rooted prejudice. He beckoned the flight attendant with an impatient gesture. "Excuse me, ... Can you check if this lady really belongs in this section?" Charles asked loudly, as if speaking for everyone there. "Of course I have nothing against it, but you know how it is. We want to maintain the standard of service." Several passengers glanced at him, some with silent approval, others with mild discomfort. The flight attendant, a young woman with steady eyes named Clara, responded elegantly, "Sir, I can assure you that her ticket is valid. Mrs. Johnson is exactly where she should be." But Charles persisted, this time with a sarcastic smile. "Interesting. So anyone can buy a seat here these days. It seems the airline is more accessible than I imagined." Mrs. Johnson slowly raised her eyes and regarded Charles with disarming serenity. There was no anger in her gaze, only an almost disconcerting calm. "Sir," she said politely but firmly, "when one buys a ticket, one pays for the seat and for respect. Both are expensive, and perhaps that is why not everyone can offer them." The comment was like a silent slap. Some passengers lowered their eyes, embarrassed by Charles's posture. Others couldn't help but smile discreetly at the woman's response. The curious boy, sitting in the man in the seat next to Mrs. Johnson, watched her with wide eyes. He didn't understand much about what was happening, but he sensed this woman was special. "Miss, are you famous?" he asked innocently. She looked at the boy and smiled, lightly stroking his arm. "Maybe, but not in the way they imagine." The boy frowned, intrigued. Charles, even more irritated at being exposed, crossed his arms and let out an audible sigh, trying to regain control of the situation. The flight had already taken off, and the soft roar of the engine served as a soundtrack for the passengers seated in their leather seats. Mrs. Johnson remained serene, gazing out the window as the clouds turned to white cotton wool in the golden sunlight, but the tranquility was only apparent. In the first-class aisles, hushed conversations continued. Charles, with a glass of red wine in his hands, still exchanged mocking glances with other passengers who seemed to silently agree with him. Suddenly, the cabin door opened, and the flight captain, a tall, broad-shouldered man with an imposing gaze, stepped out. He was dressed in his impeccable uniform, his gold insignia gleaming in the cabin's soft light. The passengers fell silent. Immediately, it was rare for the captain to leave the cabin during a flight. Many assumed there was some important announcement. With firm steps, he walked through first class until he stopped beside Mrs. Johnson. To everyone's surprise, his hardened face dissolved into a warm, respectful smile. "Mrs. Johnson, what an honor to have you on our flight." The silence was absolute. Confused glances met. Charles nearly choked on his wine. The lady with the pearl necklace widened her eyes, clutching her husband's arm as if asking for an explanation. "It's an honor to fly with you. The whole company is talking about your last visit to our headquarters," the captain continued. Mrs. Johnson smiled politely, but there was something in her gaze that kept everyone intrigued. "Thank you, Captain. You always treat me so well." The curious boy beside her widened his eyes even more. "You work here, miss?" he asked, almost whispering. She smiled at him and replied softly, "In a way, yes, but not in the way you think." Charles, now visibly uncomfortable, beckoned to flight attendant Clara with an irritated wave. "Can you explain what's going on? Who is this woman?" Clara leaned in discreetly and, with a slight tone of reproach, replied, "Sir, Mrs. Johnson is a very important person to this company. Please be patient. You'll know soon." "Important? What do you mean, important?" Charles grumbled, but the flight attendant had already walked away. The mystery surrounding Mrs. Johnson grew like a dense fog. Every passenger now seemed more curious, then critical. Who could this plainly dressed woman be, yet so respected by the captain and crew? Across the aisle, a young businesswoman who hadn't been paying attention until then leaned over to his friend and murmured, "I wonder if she owns the airline." His friend laughed nervously. "If she does, I'll swallow my tie." The tension in first class was so thick it felt like the air had grown heavier. Everyone stared at Mrs. Johnson, who remained serene in her seat, her hands resting in her lap, her calm gaze lost in the clouds outside. Charles, now restless, fiddled with his cell phone as if searching for information about her. "Maybe she's a celebrity, or someone famous I haven't met yet," he thought, as he tried to access the plane's limited network. Suddenly, the sound of the cabin audio system echoed through the plane. The captain cleared his throat before speaking, his deep, firm voice filling every corner of the aircraft. "Passengers, this is the captain of this flight to Paris. I hope everyone is comfortable. Before we continue, I'd like to make a special announcement." The passengers exchanged curious glances. It was rare for the captain to interrupt a flight for anything other than an emergency. "It is with great honor that I inform you that we have on board today an extraordinary person, Mrs. Maya Johnson." The name echoed in the silent atmosphere. Some frowned, trying to remember. Others widened their eyes, as if a light had gone off in their memories. Mrs. Johnson is the founder and CEO of MJ Technologies, one of the largest technology and social innovation companies in the world. She grew up in an extremely poor community, faced countless challenges and prejudices, but through hard work and transformative vision, she built a global empire. Furthermore, she is the main investor in this airline, responsible for projects that provide thousands of scholarships for vulnerable youth. A murmur spread through the plane. "It is thanks to Mrs. Johnson that our company implemented the Educational Accessibility and Sustainability Program, changing lives across the planet. Please join me in thanking and applauding this remarkable woman." The silence lasted only a second before turning to applause, at first timid, then louder. Some passengers clapped enthusiastically, while others, embarrassed by their previous thoughts, clapped slowly, their eyes lowered. Charles, who had led the chorus of distrust and prejudice, felt his face burn with embarrassment. His hand hesitated before clapping, and his fake smile failed to hide his shock. The lady with the pearl necklace murmured to her husband, "My God, I had no idea." Her husband, serious, simply replied, "And even so, that doesn't justify what we said." Meanwhile, the curious boy next to Maya grinned from ear to ear and said, "I knew you were special." She chuckled softly and whispered, "Thank you for believing in me before anyone else." But for Maya Johnson, that applause wasn't a source of pride. She knew many clapped, not out of respect, but out of shame. And then, with a calm and determined voice, she decided it was time to speak. The applause faded until first class returned. To an almost awkward silence, Maya Johnson remained seated, her calm eyes roaming the faces around her. There was no anger in her expression, only a serenity that seemed to further discomfort those who had judged her seconds before. Slowly, she rose from her seat. The simple gesture drew everyone's attention, as if the room itself had grown denser. "Can I have a minute of yours?" she asked in a soft but firm voice. No one dared respond. The passengers simply nodded silently, some still avoiding direct eye contact. "First, I appreciate your kindness, but I need to be honest with you. It's not easy for me to be here today." Maya paused briefly, took a deep breath, and continued. 15 years ago, I was on a flight similar to this one. It was my first plane. I had saved every penny for years to buy an economy class ticket and visit my sick mother in another state. Curious eyes fixed on her. That day, I walked in nervous, but determined. As I walked down the aisle, an elegant woman looked at me and said to her husband, "They should have a plane just for people like her, so they don't bother us." An uncomfortable murmur rippled through the room. Maya kept her voice calm, but each word felt like a silent punch to the chest of those listening. I listened, and remained silent. I was young and didn't know how to respond. But in that moment, I promised myself, one day I will make sure no one has to feel small wherever they go. The woman with the pearl necklace lowered her eyes, remembering what she had whispered to her husband minutes earlier. "I worked 3 jobs. I slept on the floor. I went hungry. And yes, I cried many times. But every tear became fuel for me to create something greater than the pain. Today, I'm not here because I have money. I'm here because I decided not to let the opinions of others define who I am." Charles, the arrogant passenger, felt his face burning. His hand still trembled on the armrest. Respect shouldn't be a prize for wealth, looks, or social status. Respect is the least we all deserve, from the moment we're born. The curious boy beside her smiled shyly and said in a low voice, "I respect you, young lady." Maya bent down slightly and stroked his hair. "And that's worth more than 1,000,000 applause." A thick silence fell over first class. There was no more mockery, only shame and reflection. The silence after Maya's speech was almost palpable. No one dared move or look away. For the first time, first class, always so noisy with requests and trivial conversations, was plunged into a profound respect, albeit tinged with shame. Charles, the arrogant one, was breathing heavily. His eyes, once haughty and cold, were now lowered, almost hidden behind the hand rubbing his face. The lady with the pearl necklace let out a heavy sigh, as if carrying the weight of a conscience awakened too late. The curious boy beside Maya tugged lightly on her sleeve. "Miss, where are you going?" "Why Paris?" Maya looked at him and smiled, sweetly, but this time there was a hint of melancholy in her eyes. "I'm going to an important meeting, my little one. A meeting that could change the future of thousands of children." The boy's eyes widened. "Are you going to save children?" "I'll try." The adults around held their breath, realizing this woman carried more than wealth or status. She carried a purpose. Maya continued, now addressing everyone on the plane. "In the suburbs where I grew up, there was a dilapidated school. Many of my childhood friends dropped out of school because they had to work to survive. I was almost one of those children. Paris is where my company is closing a deal with an international organization to build schools and technology centers in underserved communities around the world. If it works, thousands of black and poor children will have access to what I never had." The passengers looked at each other, embarrassed. "While we worry about the temperature of the wine and the size of the seat, this woman carries the weight of the future of so many lives," thought the young businesswoman sitting in the front row. At that moment, Charles stood up, visibly moved. His voice trembled as he spoke. "Mrs. Johnson, I behaved like a fool. I was arrogant, prejudiced, and I want to apologize. From the bottom of my heart." Everyone looked at him, surprised by the gesture. Maya stared at him for a few seconds. Her gaze was firm, but there was no hatred in it. "Mr. Charles, you don't need to apologize to me. You need to apologize to all the people you judged before you met me." The impact of her words hit not only Charles, but everyone there. Even the proudest felt his heart sink. Maya then sat back down, adjusting her bag on her lap. The curious boy, his eyes shining, said softly, "I want to be just like you when I grow up." She smiled and replied, "No, dear, you'll be even better." The plane continued its calm course at over 36,000 feet, while the passengers, still reflective, remained silent. Maya Johnson's presence had completely changed the atmosphere. Even Charles, who had previously seemed like a lion in a gilded cage, now remained meek in his seat, his eyes fixed on the ground. But suddenly, a shrill sound cut through the air. A sharp beep echoed through the cabin, and the plane shook slightly. "Passengers, please remain in your seats and fasten your seatbelts immediately," the captain's tense voice announced. The cabin lights began to flicker, and a flurry of nervous murmurs filled the silence that had reigned until then. "What's going on?" asked the woman with the pearl necklace, holding tightly to her husband's arm. The curious boy looked at Maya with wide eyes. "Miss, is the plane going to crash?" Maya, remaining calm, held the boy's hand. "No, honey, it's going to be okay." One of the flight attendants rushed down the aisle, his face visibly worried. The passengers began to stir, and Charles, panicked, shouted, "Someone tell us what's happening. I demand to know." Just then, the captain appeared at the cabin door. His expression was tense, but he tried to keep his voice steady. "Gentlemen, we've had a technical failure in the navigation system. We're contacting the control tower for a possible emergency descent. I urge everyone to remain calm." The words emergency descent fell like a weight on every passenger. Some began to cry, others prayed softly. The boy next to Maya clung to her arm. Maya looked around and realized that fear was more contagious than panic. She stood calmly, despite the fastened seatbelt sign being on. "Mrs. Johnson, please sit down," the flight attendant urged, distressed. "Just a moment," she said firmly. Then Maya raised her hands, drawing everyone's attention. "I know everyone is scared. I would be too. If I hadn't learned one important thing in life, fear only dominates us when we let it enter our hearts." Everyone's eyes turned to her. Even the captain paused for a moment to listen. "Breathe. Look at me. We're all in the same boat, or rather, the same plane." She smiled softly, trying to ease the weight of the moment. "Trust the pilots and the crew. They're trained for situations like this. Let's stay calm and support each other. That's how we survive, together." The calm and authority in Maya's voice were almost hypnotic. Gradually, the passengers began to take deep breaths. The crying ceased. Even Charles, his palms sweaty, seemed to find some peace. "She's right," the captain said with a slight smile. "We will do everything to ensure this flight ends safely. Trust us." And in that instant, something shifted in the air. Fear was replaced by a collective strength, a silent trust that united everyone. The plane hovered in the air with an almost palpable tension. But now, instead of panic, there was an unexpected calm among the passengers. Maya's voice echoed in each of their minds like an anchor of serenity. "Breathe. Together, we will get through this." The boy next to her, who had been shaking before, now had his head leaning against her shoulder, holding her hand tightly. "Miss, I'm not afraid anymore. It's because you're here." Maya smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. "That's right, little one. You're brave, much braver than you know." Suddenly, the cabin PA system came back on. The captain's voice, now more stable, announced, "Passengers, we've managed to stabilize the navigation system. We've received clearance for immediate landing at the nearest airport. In a few minutes, we'll be on solid ground." A collective sigh echoed through the cabin. People hugged each other, others wept with relief. The silence had given way to prayers of gratitude. When the plane finally touched down, the wheels touching the runway with a gentle bump, spontaneous applause erupted. It was unlike any applause Maya had ever heard. It wasn't just relief, it was for her. All eyes turned to the black woman, in simple clothing, who remained seated serenely, but with a slight smile on her face. The lady with the pearl necklace, now with tears in her eyes, slowly stood up. "Mrs. Johnson, I was wrong about you. Thank you for reminding us what truly matters." Charles also stood. His voice was choked. I learned a lesson I will never forget. Forgive me for being so blind." Maya, with unshakable peace, replied, "Don't ask me for forgiveness. Promise me you'll be different from now on, that you'll treat everyone with the same respect you desire to receive." Charles nodded, tears streaming down his once proud face. As the passengers began to disembark, each one made a point of thanking Maya personally, not for her money, nor her status, but because she had shown everyone the value of humanity and empathy in a time of crisis. The captain was waiting for her at the door, his hand outstretched. "Mrs. Johnson, in all my years of flying, I've never seen anyone so inspiring. Thank you for saving more than just our flight. You've saved many hearts here." Maya smiled, squeezing his hand firmly. "We can all be beacons, even when the sky seems dark." And then she descended the plane stairs under the watchful eyes of the crew and passengers who stood still, admiring this simple, yet extraordinary woman. As soon as Maya passed through the airport's glass doors, a cool wind caressed her face. The morning Paris sun illuminated the runway, reflecting off the terminal's modern facade. She adjusted the silk scarf on her head and walked with calm steps, as if carrying the world on her shoulders, but without betraying the weight she felt. Outside, a crowd awaited her. Men and women of different ages and nationalities held signs with phrases written in various languages. "Thank you, Maya. You changed our lives. Hope for the future." As soon as she appeared, a deafening applause echoed. People began to applaud with tears in their eyes, some raising their phones to record the moment, others simply watching in reverent silence. The curly-haired French boy at the front of the crowd shouted, his voice breaking, "Mademoiselle Johnson, merci. Because of you, I'm going to study." Maya smiled, her eyes welling up as she walked toward them. "It's not because of me, dear. It's because you deserve it." A reporter approached, microphone in hand, trying to break through the discreet security details surrounding her. "Mrs. Johnson, can you tell us the purpose of this trip?" She took a deep breath and replied with the same calmness she'd displayed on the plane. "I'm here to form a partnership with the World Education Organization. Our goal is to build schools and technology centers in 50 countries over the next 10 years, starting with the poorest communities, the same ones I came from." The crowd cheered even louder, and some chanted her name in unison, "Maya, Maya, Maya." Across the street, a man in simple clothes was crying profusely. He held a crumpled photo of Maya standing next to children at a makeshift school in Africa. He approached with timid steps and said, "Mrs. Johnson, my daughter learned to read because you built a school in our village. I can't thank you enough. .. Maya held his calloused hands firmly and said, "You don't need to thank me. Just keep believing in her potential. An educated child is a flame that never goes out." The cameras captured every detail of that historic moment. But for Maya, the most important thing wasn't the lenses trained on her, but the people's eyes, full of hope. The camera flashes illuminated Maya's serene face as the crowd applauded enthusiastically. But amidst that sea of voices, she seemed to hear only the sound of her own heart, clutching tightly the small, worn leather bag, the same one that had accompanied her since the hard times. She climbed up. She stood on a small makeshift platform in the airport lobby and raised her hand for silence. Gradually, the applause died down. The air grew so still that the sound of planes taking off in the distance could be heard. Maya took a deep breath and began speaking in a soft but firm voice that seemed to penetrate the soul of each person there. "Today you applaud me because I became someone important, because I built companies, invested in schools, and traveled the world. But I want you to understand one thing. What brought me here wasn't money, it was faith. It was the certainty that no one is too small to make a big difference." She looked at the French boy who had shouted her name minutes earlier. "When I was a child, just like you, they told me I would be nobody, that a poor black girl would never have a voice in the world. And for a long time, I believed that, until the day I realized that the world only changes when someone dares to dream and work for that dream." An emotional murmur ran through the crowd. Many were already wiping away tears. Then Maya did something unexpected. She pulled a white envelope from her bag and held it high. "In this envelope is the partnership agreement with the World Education Organization. It can build 50 schools, but I want more than that. I want each of you to be part of this change too." She approached a young black woman in the crowd, holding a baby in her arms, dressed simply and with a weary look. Maya handed her the envelope. I built my empire with work. Now I want to share the tools with people like you. Use this to open the first school in your neighborhood. Transform lives. Multiply hope." The woman, surprised, began to cry, unable to say a word. The baby in her arms smiled innocently, as if feeling the weight of the moment. Maya turned back to the crowd. "If each of us plants a seed, together we will build a forest. Never judge someone by their appearance, their skin color, or what they carry. You'll never know the depth of the story within them." A profound silence fell over the place. And then, as if a single heartbeat were beating within everyone, thunderous applause erupted. People wept, others hugged, and even the journalists put down their cameras for a moment to clap loudly. Maya stepped off the platform with a slight smile, walking toward the airport exit. She knew there was still much work ahead, but in that moment, she felt she had already done more than build companies or invest in technology. She had touched souls, and as she disappeared through the automatic doors, someone whispered, "It's not just a woman. It's a revolution walking on